Today is Yud Aleph Shvat, and as Rabbi Gerari said last night, today is the day that the Rebbe was Mekabel the Messias in Tovshin Yud Aleph in 1951, and therefore it's a Yom Tov, and a good Yom Tov, and we should be able to be mamish mekusham to the Rebbe, and shaykh to the Rebbe, and be able to fulfill what the Rebbe wants.
Amen.
When Rabbi Stern Menachem asked me to speak today, I said, first of all, I said, since I come to Melbourne, I don't do much. But then I thought, you know what, I should. And then I realized that as another reason I should also, it's because it's my aunt, Yortzeit, who we were very close to, on Yud Shvat. And I thought, you know what, let me sponsor the meal too, or be partial sponsor of the meal too. And so it's also a little bit Ilui Nishmas, or a lot Ilui Nishmas, my aunt, Farcha Bas Yena HaKayim.
Also today is your side of Batya Baila Bas Fishel.
What's her name?
Batya Baila Bas Fishel.
Batya Baila Bas Fishel, Shomishav and Ali, Zayn the Gutta Better.
Who's that?
All right. I want to just speak a little bit about what I think is the greatest, or one of the greatest chidushim of our Rebbe. Let me say in advance that everything what the Rebbe said was chidushim, but I want to, every one of us who was zecher to hear the Rebbe and be by Farbrengens and be by Yechidus, every one of us has heard lots and lots of things. However, each one of us, I think, has certain things which really, really stick in our minds and stick in our hearts. One of the things that I heard from the Rebbe was his explanation of the Maimer Basi Legani, where the Rebbe says something which I think is extremely unusual. The Rebbe says in that Maimer in Basi Legani, the Rebbe says that really, Olam Hazeh, this world, it's really the most beautiful garden. It's just like a garden is full of fruits and it's full of flowers, it's full of beauty. Olam Hazeh is really the most beautiful place that one could imagine. And that's what we have to keep in mind. Now, the reality is that this seems to be and seems to contradict a lot of what we learn in Chassidus. If you take a look in Chassidus, in Tanya, what does it say about Olam Hazeh? It says, Rubai Kikulayra, that the majority, the vast majority of this world is evil, Urishayim Goivrim Boy, and the wicked are dominant in this world. In other words, Olam Hazeh is really, really a terrible place. And yet here the Rebbe is coming along and the Rebbe is saying, Botzi Legani, hey, wake up guys, this is really a beautiful place. Well, the experience, I think, of many of us, and many times, and especially recently in Australia, is that Olam Hazeh ain't that beautiful, right? We have a lot of terrible things happening in Olam Hazeh. And yet the Rebbe insists that Olam Hazeh is Gani, Gnuni, it's a beautiful place, it's the most magnificent place that we can imagine. And how do we really understand this? Now, what this to me is a tremendous chiddush of the Rebbe. Now, the reality is that everything which the Rebbe said, the Rebbe always bases on his predecessors, right? If you go, especially in Maimorim of Yud Shvat, if you look at Maimorim Yud Shvat, the Rebbe quotes from every one of the other Rebbeim, etc. But if you'll also look at the Rebbe's Maimorim Yud Shvat, you'll also see there are a lot of Yesh Leimas, which the Rebbe is basically humbly saying, well, you could explain it like this. And we know that whenever the Rebbe says Yesh Leima, the Rebbe is actually saying his interpretation, his novel interpretation of what the Rebbeim have said, and now we know what the Rebbe is really saying. And now when the Rebbe says a Yesh Leima, really what the Rebbe is doing is, he's revealing to us. The Rebbe says it humbly, Yesh Leima, maybe you could say, but really, like it says that by the Friedrich Rebbe, or the Rebbe Rashab said that that my tata's Yesh Leima is by mi avadai. That when my father says, you could say, that is certainly the case. So when the Rebbe says Yesh Leima, when the Rebbe gives a beer, the Rebbe's been megala something which wasn't there, which wasn't clear beforehand, which wasn't really graspable beforehand. Of course, it was there beforehand, but it wasn't something that we could grasp. And when the Rebbe comes along and the Rebbe says that this world is really a garden, in spite of what we know beforehand, the Olam Hazeh is a terrible place. Rabbi Gerari told the story last night about the Mittler Rebbe, that when the people of Lyoshna came to the Mittler Rebbe and they wanted Gashmias, basically the Mittler Rebbe said, "Fech, go away." And when it went to the Alter Rebbe said, "Oh no, Gashmis is something which is really important, okay?" But the normal attitude of Olam Hazeh and Chassidus is, "Oh, it's fair, we don't need it." And yet the Rebbe says, not only it's not fair, it's the most beautiful thing you can imagine. There's nothing better, there's nothing more beautiful than it. So how do we understand this? Well, there's actually a very cute interchange between the Rebbe. I'm fine. There's a very cute interchange between the Rebbe and someone. Someone once came to the Rebbe and said to the Rebbe, it says in Chassidus and everything that, if you dig deeply, you're going to find good. Well, he says, well, I know Freud, and Freud is a great guy, great psychoanalyst. And Freud says, look, when you dig into a human being, you're going to find all sorts of, I don't want to say what, but all sorts of schmutz, all sorts of dirt and filth. So the Rebbe basically says to him, the Rebbe says, Freud's right. But the problem with Freud is that he didn't dig deep enough. So if you dig deep, you're going to find filth. But if you dig deep enough, you're going to find something deeper. And the Rebbe gave an analogy that when you're actually looking at a road and, you see these guys, these laborers digging up a road, there's 3 people standing around and 1 person digging when the government pays for it. Anyway, when they're first of all digging, what you're going to find is you're going to find dirt. But if you dig very deeply, what you're going to find is water. And you dig deeply, you're going to find diamonds. And you're going to find jewels. So the only kunst is you have to be able to dig deep enough. So the reality is that Olam Hazeh is beautiful. But sometimes, really, you have to be able to dig. If I'm allowed to quote from Einstein, the Rebbe actually does quote from Einstein. He doesn't actually mention him by name. But in the very famous Sikha of Noach, where the Rebbe says that in the 600th year of Noach, there's going to be a great wisdom from above, the great wisdom from below. I won't elaborate too much on the Sikha, but towards the end of the Sikha, the Rebbe says like this, and the Rebbe says, what do we learn? And the Rebbe says, what's wisdom below? The Rebbe says is the great chidushim, the great in discoveries of modern science. That's the wisdom below. And from the wisdom of below, you'll be able to understand the wisdom of above, basically. So what is the wisdom of below? Science. And the Rebbe says, and what does science finally realize, which is, of course, which Einstein says? He says that mass and energy, mass and energy are really equal, one and the same. There's an achdus, there's a pure unity between mass and energy. And the Rebbe says that this is a marshal, this is a metaphor for how Elikus and its Welt, and Welt is Elikus, right? Als is God, and God is Als. God is everything, everything is God. And you see this actually in the metaphor of modern science, where energy and mass are equal, right? E equals mc squared essentially means that if you have mass and you explode the mass, you're going to get a huge amount of energy, because energy and mass are really different aspects of the same thing. So what the Rebbe says, and what Einstein once said is, he says, you know what, there are people who try to be able to understand, how electricity works, magnetism works, how gases work. They're all right about different protein. He says, but I'm not interested. I'm interested in knowing how the universe works. So, if I may say so also, you find in Chassidus a lot of different things, right? A lot of different aspects. But what the Rebbe did to us, and what the Rebbe was megala to us, is what it's all about, what the essence of everything is all about. And the essence of what everything is all about is that this world is the most beautiful place that you can possibly imagine. The only thing is that it's up to us to be able to release the energy which is in Olam Hazeh. Now, again, as I said, this seems to contradict a lot of what we learned in Chassidus beforehand. I mean, we know that what it says in Tanya. I mean, we learned Tanya just recently in Perek Yuches, Yutes, that every Yid, if you dig deep down, you're going to find the likus, right? And that's what it says. That even Pesha Yisrael, Kal Sheva Kalim, when it comes to a moment of Mesiras Nefesh, what you're going to find that this person is going to be able to give up his life for the Eibishter. So when it comes to a Yid, you're going to know for sure you're going to go deep down. I mean, and the Rebbe's are a bigger chiddush than that. I mean, what I'm the spoil about is when you come to Beis Tammuz, we read about the arrest and freedom of the Rebbe. So what you find over there is you find something, it's phenomenal. When they're arresting the Friedrich Rebbe, there's two Yidden involved. One is Lulav, one's Nachmanson, right? Famous story. So Nachmanson, when he's arresting the Friedrich Rebbe, he says to Friedrich Rebbe cynically, right? Clearly it's cynical. This, please, Rebbe, can I carry your suitcase the way my grandfather, who was a chassid, by the way, carried your grandfather's suitcase? Clearly, he was being, but pashtus, he was being cynical, right? The Rebbe tells this story, and the Rebbe says, look at this. Even that person, Nachmanson, as he's about to arrest the Friedrich Rebbe, what does he say? He says, Rebbe. Deep down, he understands that the Rebbe is a Rebbe. And when I heard this, I have to tell you, I mean, there is a lot of stories like that, about from the Rebbe, and I've spoken about before, you know, the famous story of Miriam Bas Bil, all sorts of things. But here, this is a person who's arresting the Friedrich Rebbe, Rebbeinu Shalom. And the Rebbe is saying, look, even he's got this tzitzit key. He's saying, Rebbe, unbelievable. But the Rebbe says more. The Rebbe is saying, Olam Hazeh, this world. And you see, this is brought to the surface, especially when the Rebbe speaks about Sheva Mitzvah Neinech. Where did you find that any of the Rebbeim before the Rebbe should come along and have such a koch that a goy, our job is to be able to be Makarev the goyim? Where did you find this? You never found it anywhere. Yeah, you know, I mean, when it comes to Tes Kislev, you come along, make a big deal about the fact that the Sorim and the Sari Amlucha will all kind of realize me, Hashem Hoysazois. But to be able to go out of your way, to be able to find a goy and to be Makarev goyim. And I remember, although later on it wasn't so much, but I remember reading the Rebbe said that the Botei Chabad, their job is also to be Makarev goyim. Right? I think later on, they didn't do it so much because they're worried about goyim and yidden mixing too much. But anyway, but the point is that we have a responsibility towards goyim too, and the Rebbe says that because the truth of the matter is that Olam Hazeh is something that we have to be mahaber. And I have to say, this was brought home to me, really, really a lot, by what happened on Thursday night, right, in Sydney, where they went to the Opera House, right, which was the same place where Yamach Shmam Zichron, the pro-Palestinians, the pro-terrorists, and the anti-Israel mob, on the 8th of October, came along and said, gas the Jews, where's the Jews, whatever, this, etc. They went to that place, and the government did absolutely nothing, right? They went to that place, and they had the biggest celebration of Yiddishkeit that we've ever, not only ever seen in Australia, but I think that we've ever seen outside of Israel, where you had leaders of government, even the Prime Minister, who unfortunately has been a massive disappointment, but nevertheless he also said the right things. And to be able to speak openly about Jewish customs, and to have it televised of all of Australia. Where has there ever been such a thing in Chutz La'aretz? And Dafka in the place of the biggest cheshech. That place was a place of huge cheshech. And Dafka over there, what we saw was, I was actually in tears. I mean, everyone was demonstrating clearly about the Rebbe. Rabbi Feldman spoke about the Rebbe. Ullman spoke about the Rebbe. They played a video of the Rebbe. And again on national television, everyone was able to see it. It's something amazing. Everyone is involved. All the Goyim are involved. And all the Goyim are hearing about Jewish customs. All the Goyim are hearing about light over darkness, that we have to transform light into darkness. I don't believe that there's ever such a thing like that. And I thought to myself that this is really taking something which is extraordinarily ugly and showing that within it there's a phenomenal light. You know, I was in the city on Thursday, actually before this whole function on Thursday night, and I was taking my grandkids up to it was a school holiday, say my grandchildren somewhere. Anyway, my daughter moved a little bit ahead of us, And she sends me a message on the house, on the WhatsApp, and she says like this. She says, when you get to Burke Street and Swanson Street, which is the middle of the city, you'll see there's a bunch of anti-Israel people over there. Maybe you should go and talk to them. So, me, I'm not a person to shy away from something. So I get to Burke Street and Swanson Street, and I'm looking. I don't see them straight over there. Oh, they're across the road. So I cross the road, and I go over to them and I say, really? After December the 14th? So they ignore me. So they turned they turned their backs towards me. Mamish turned their backs towards me. I said, really? After December the 14th? Anyway, you're in my space. I said, well, I'm not moving. I'm staying right over here. Anyway, so I stood there. I stood my ground. Anyway, a few minutes later, they start packing up. And then one of them comes to me, and one of them says to me, starts talking to me, Netanyahu this, Netanyahu that, then aside all this garbage. I said, I only want to ask you one question. The question I want to ask you is, what do you think of Australia? Australia? It's a racist country. I said, well, if that's the case, I have nothing more to talk to you about. Anyway, in the meantime, they're packed up and they're going. But while all this is happening, another non-Jewish woman comes over. And this other non-Jewish woman, she gets really upset about the fact that she thinks they're harassing me. I went over to them. So she starts attacking them too, and she gets really, really emotional about it. She's
young woman?
She was probably a 40, maybe close to 50, not old. And she says to them, she says, this man over here knows people who were killed. I bet you don't know anyone who was killed in Bondi. Anyway, she really attacked. Anyway. In the meantime, they pack up and go, and she's very emotional. So I asked my wife, who was with me, Henya, I said, maybe you should go and talk to her and think. So Henya chases after her, and she's so emotional, and she says, look, I really support you guys. And she bursts out crying, so Henya gives her a hug, etc. What do I see from this? I see from this that until now, we had a teacher at school in year 7. His name was Mr. McElroy. Form 1 it was called in those days. Anyway, this teacher was a very interesting teacher because he was the best science teacher we ever had. At the end of 1 year, the school kicked him out. Why? Because he didn't keep to the curriculum. He showed us how cars work, etc., all the kinds of things that kids are interested in, rather than, theoretical, scientific stuff, But before he left, he said, I want to tell you one thing, that if you scratch any Gentile deep enough, you're going to find an anti-Semite. That was coming from a Gentile, McElroy, right? So I said, and that stuck with me. It really stuck with me, this idea. The reality is, however, what we've seen now is there's a difference. There's a difference. There are goyim who actually do support us, and this has really brought us out. I was in Florida a year and a half ago, etc., in a Walmart, and a woman comes over to me, and she steps over to me, and she bursts out crying when she sees me, and she says, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And she comes over, she gives me a hug. And she says, what's happening to you? I'm really sorry. And then another time I was actually about to take a flight, and I'm standing in the queue to take the flight, and the captain walking into this, and he sees me, and he says, I want to let you know that we support you. Come into the plane, and I want you to take a photo with you in the cockpit. And I did. What I'm saying is that this brought out the good in the Olam Hazeh. There's a very famous mime of the Mittel Rebbe, and it's called the Haven Indian Anshe Chayil. It's one of the last memorim of the Mittel Rebbe, and he explains that the purpose of the candles, the point over there in the mime is Yisbar v'Yislabna Advarim, that before Mashiach times, that everything needs to be clarified. Everything needs to be able to be. We need to know the difference between good and bad. We need to know who's good and who's bad. And that's exactly what's happening right now. It happened through a terrible, terrible thing. There's no question about it. And Chalila, that we're not trying to be able to justify it in any way, and on the contrary, we have to come along and say, Lama Hariosa, Lama Zem, we have to go with Tainis to Rebbeinu Shloim, we have to ask Yenish Rebbeinu Shloim what he did, and what happened, and why is he doing this, etc. On the other hand, to understand that something is actually happening, I want to share with you something. And again, it's not meant as a hatzdaka in any kind of way, but I was learning. Someone pointed,
Albert, good or bad?
he hasn't come out of the wash yet. So far, he's not doing too good. Anyway, there's an interesting mime. There's someone pointed out to me for a different reason, but there's a mime of the Tzemach Tzedek. There's a mime of the Tzemach Tzedek about why someone who's a balmum, someone who's got a what's that?
Blemish.
Blemish, or is missing a limb, is not allowed to serve in the base of Mikdash. Allowed to eat the kodshim, is not allowed to serve in the base of Mikdash. At any rate, in that mimer, I only saw it a week or two ago. The Tzemach Tzedek says an unbelievable marshal. The Tzemach Tzedek says like this. He says that sometimes when there's a war and the enemy is very, very strong, so what the king does in order to break the ranks of the enemy is he sends a battalion or a unit over to attack the enemy. They then break ranks in order to be able to pursue this battalion. This battalion gets very badly damaged in the process, but as a result of them breaking ranks, the king is able to win the war against them. And I read this marshal again. It was not, and this was after, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's exactly what happened, that here you had Reuven Morrison, Oliver Sholem, Shem Yikim Dome Zecher, Tzadik Lebracha, he caused them to break ranks, right? And then they ran away, and then they were able to kill him on the bridge. And then I think it's even more than that. We had anti-Semitism everywhere, like my teacher said, but it was hidden. And you know who was who. And now as a result of this, they broke ranks, and we're able to come along and we're able to see who's who. We're able to see who the really bad guys are and who the good guys are. And everything is getting clarified now like it was never clarified before. And thank God there's a lot of people actually who are opposing the bad guys and seriously opposing the bad guys, as you're able to see in our own local kind of situation. At any rate, the point which I want to bring out over here is that if you look into the Rebbe's Maimer, and the Maimorim I should say, the Rebbe's Biurim on the Maimorim of Bossi Lagani, especially last year and this year, where the Rebbe is explaining the Inyan of Lamaila Adin Ketzel, Mata Mata Adin Tachlis, and the Rebbe explains that high without a limit and low without a limit, etc. I'm not going to go into the Haskalah of the Inyan right now, but what the Rebbe says is as follows, that last year especially, and then elaborating this year, Lamaila Adin Ketz means the greatest unimaginable Halem hiddenness of Elikus, right, is the real essence of Elikus. And it's expressed in the Tzimtzumim, in the greatest contractions that we have in this world, is a reflection of the very essence and the deepest hiddenness of God. And this is really, like it says in this is my this is expressed dafke in the tzimtzum, in the ugliness, in the biggest tzimtzumim of Olam Hazeh, is really the essence of the Eibishter Alein. And the Rebbe says this is the Eitzer. In other words, the knowledge that Olam Hazeh contains within the very essence, not Giluyim, not the Matamad Tachlis, but Davke L'mayla in Ketz. Davke, the very essence of Hashem, is reflected in the what apparently is this is the essence of Hashem. This is the essence of Atzmus. This is the beauty. This is Basi Lagani. And this is why the Friediger Rebbe says at the very beginning that Iskafti Sitracha Istal Yikru the Kuchabricha B'chula Almin. What does it mean? And the Friediger Rebbe explains that when you have a bit of kfir, when you basically, very simply said, when you do something that you don't really want to do, right? There's a mitzvah you don't want to do, could be bothered, do it later. And you do it now, or you do it sooner, okay? Or there's an avera that you want to do, and you push it off, and you don't do it. This causes poshet a gili of asmus and muhus. You take a poshet, you have a yeshus, and you transform it. You transform this arrogance that you have, both internal and also external, by the wealth, by the ugliness of the world. You transform it. You turn it into something good, as they're attempting to do in Sydney. Again, not a justification, chalul, of what happened there, but they're trying to be able to turn it. And look, you had goyim speaking about mitzvahs, the importance of doing mitzvahs. The same goyim who didn't do anything on October the 8th, the same goyim are now speaking everyone should do a mitzvah. But you have to be able to hold yourself strong, and you can't give in, and you got to be able to already confront it, and through confronting it means niskafya, not to be able to let it win over, to be really strong, both against yourself, and I don't want to push that up because we have to do it in our own lives as well, a bit of kviyah. And by the way, I want to say, when I speak about iskafya, I don't know about you, but I don't always win. Halavai Benini. But the reality is, b'chol kviyah. Let's say you wanted to do something that you really shouldn't, and you didn't do it right away. You pushed yourself off. Oh, it was hard. And you pushed yourself off. Oh, it was really hard. Push yourself. Oh, it's really hard. And in the end, you do the thing you shouldn't have done. It was not great. And you know what? You're probably going to have to go to Gehenna because of it. But in the meantime, you came along and you skafti sidrachra and you called this tali gikru kuchbrich b'chol almin. In the meantime, you cause a gili likus, gili of asmus and muhus. Right? Every time you hold yourself back, even if you don't always win, but you hold yourself back for a second, called kviyah. Every time you hold that moment, you megala asmus and muhus. The Eibishter helfen that every one of us, in our own ways, we are all confronted with darkness, right? I mean, everyone in their own lives we have plenty of darkness, but the Rebbe's view is that we need to be able to not look at it as darkness. We need to be able to look at it as light. We need to be able to look at it as a garden. We have to look at it as something which is beauty, which is just a little bit concealed, and all we need to do is to be able to break it open. And as soon as you break it open, you're going to see a blast of holiness, the like of which you've never experienced before. And to borrow the analogy which the Rebbe said, and by the way, when the Rebbe speaks in Parshas Noach, the Rebbe says, quotes from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says that every marshal in Chassidus is nishtalshel, is really an expression of what's really going on Lamaila. It's not just someone made up a marshal, it's actually an outer expression of what's really happening. So if you take this marshal of E equals mc squared, energy equals mass, and what it really means is, it means that E is energy equals mass multiplied by the square of the speed of light. So that's 300,000 kilometers per second multiplied by 300,000 kilometers per second, which ends up being 9 billion kilometers per second.
You lost me a long time ago.
9 billion. Anyway, what it says is that energy is mass multiplied by 9 billion. Okay? What does that mean? That when a tiny fraction of Gashmias, really there's 9 billion times more of energy. And as the Rebbe says, in one little tiny bit of chumrius, of bad, there's 9 billion times more elikus, kaviyachal, much more than that. All you have to do is break it, and then the energy comes out. That's all you have to do. And then the energy comes out. And every time you do a little bit of breaking, you're bringing out a phenomenal amount of energy. It's starting yikra the kuchabrich and kulalman. The Frierdiker Rebbe says it's save it kulalman, but we know that the Rebbe says it doesn't only mean save it. It means save it and hide and save and hide and save and hide and bit atmus alein. So Yevishel will help them to be. Should be able to take up Yizechet. This is really Teraseh Shel Mashiach. I think everything the Rebbe says is really Teraseh Shel Mashiach and Terech Hadoshim Iti Teitzei. That the Rebbe was wanted to be Megala to us and to our generation, Derech Shvi, that we have the ability to be able to be Megala, the real essence of Hashem. Sometimes it comes in the most strange and most kind of really difficult ways, right? But nevertheless, to understand that all these simsumim, all the stuff that we see, is really just a garden waiting for us to be able to open it up.
Thank you, Rebbe. We'll say the flame for your auntie.
Thank you.
And I also want to welcome Rabbi Gerari, even though you welcomed some of the people who weren't here before, but especially something very close to home. And that is Rabbi Gerari's brother-in-law. Many of you may remember, some of you may remember that is, Rabbi Tachtel, Yuri Tachtel, is a shliach here in Yeshiva over 2 years. And he was such a Lebanese guy that they brought him out for the third year for camp. Rani Tataka brought him out for camp, and because he really did a great job. And I must say, yeah, Berlin, exactly. Yeah,
Was
yeah,
he 2
Berlin.
years ago?
For 2 years as a Bacher. It was either 30
so
years ago.
many years, yeah.
30 years ago. And I must say, Yuri, who by his wedding, and
I should have said L'chaim before I started.
who by
Yeah.
the Rabbi
Okay.
Yari's Torah, and he's becoming the Rabbi of Ulan, maybe healthy, maybe gesund. And Rabbi Tachtel was a big influence on myself and most of my older brother Yehuda. He went to Berlin. He brought a chitas to my brother's bar mitzvah. I think he started chitas then. We started Raman. We moved to Eretz Yisrael, whatever else, and we followed. We kind of stayed in touch. So this is a bit of a koras I tell to the shwager, to the dear brother-in-law, and we really take it. We don't take it for granted. All the Rebbe's brachas and a lot of mazel in your holy work in Krakow, Chaim.
L'chaim.